Welcome to a new vision of reality, TSK for the 21st century, our new series on the time-space knowledge vision. TSK starts from the radical suggestion that deep, open-ended, sustained inquiry into time, space, and knowledge, as fundamental facets or elements of our being, can have a profoundly transformative impact on our ways of being and knowing in the world. Many in our time, as we are moving into the third decade of the 21st century, feel that we're caught up rather surprisingly in various crises of meaning and sense-making. And I've long felt that TSK is powerfully resonant with and relevant to the various integral, metamodern, and other communities attempting to address these crises. So I wanted to open up a series where we could explore TSK retrospectively, considering its origins and intentions, and prospectively, in light of what wisdom and ways of working it might offer us going forward. For episode 4 of A New Vision of Reality, I'm happy to welcome Bob Pasternak, the former director of the Nyingma Institute of Colorado, a trained psychotherapist, and a teacher for many years of both Buddhism and TSK. All right, well, welcome, Bob. I've corresponded with you in the past many years ago very briefly, but never really had a chance to connect with you or talk with you, so I'm looking forward to this. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I'd like to just start with a question prior to any involvement in the time-space knowledge teachings, or TSK, and just wanted to ask you, were there any experiences or interests that you had as a child or a young adult that awakened you to new senses of awareness or consciousness, or new senses of time or space?
No, I don't think I can say that I did have that. As you may know, I had met Rinpoche back in 1967 in India, and when I moved to the Bay Area, he had just moved to the Bay Area. He moved there in August, and I moved there in November. And basically, I was his student starting in 1969. And then TSK came out as a book in 1977, but I'd been a student of his in Buddhism, Dharma, studying Sanskrit and Tibetan and doing the various things. And so I got involved with TSK because that was what he was presenting.
Sure. Well, what led you initially to go to India and get interested in studying Buddhism?
I got my BS and I went to the Peace Corps. And I was in the Peace Corps. I was sent to Nepal. And I lived in Nepal from 66 to 68. And one of the places where I was during the Peace Corps time was Swayambhunath. So I lived about 100 yards from the stupa in Swayambhunath. And I guess energetically, I became involved. And then once I came back, I had a really hard time with culture shock. And really held on to things related to Asia, Nepal, India, and started studying more scholastically. And then, like I say, I'm connected with Rinpoche. And then parallel to that, I went to law school and continued with my education and my life. But basically, almost every day of the week, I would be over at the on Webster Street and studying Buddhism or Tibetan, and at the time, whatever was available, I was reading. So that's kind of how I got involved.
Sure. Well, I understand the magic and the attraction of Swayambhunath. I have been to Nepal several times as well, and also actually am now married to a woman from Nepal.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I had an interesting experience myself of meeting a teacher over in Nepal at Triton Norbutse Monastery.
Mm-hmm.
And I had not finished my college yet. And I spoke to the teacher there, and I indicated that I'd like to study with him and stay there. And he said, "Have you finished all of your Dharma back in the US? Are your parents going to be upset if you have left anything unfinished. And I said, well, I haven't finished my BA. And he said, please go back and finish that. And then you're welcome to come back here if you'd like. And I returned to the US and to Texas and was also, like you, filled with culture shock and not certain how to digest where I was. But within 1 week, I met a new Tibetan Buddhist teacher there and started studying with him. And it turns out he was raised by the person who had referred me to go back to the US. So it was a nice little connection there, and everything unfolded from there. So
great.
Yeah. So I understand then that you are involved with Buddhist teachings and practice, and that you've taught Buddhism as well, I believe. Is that
Yes,
the case?
Rinpoche sent me to. I lived at the Nyingma Institute and then at Padma Ling back in the 80s, and so I was teaching at the institute in Berkeley. And then in 87, Rinpoche sent me to Boulder, Colorado, to be the director of the Nyingma Institute in Boulder. And so yes, I basically have been teaching Buddhism and TSK since 1980. And that continues.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you hold TSK alongside your Buddhist practice? What is TSK for you within that ecosystem of practices? How do you relate to it alongside your involvement in the Dharma?
Well, I do my daily Dharma practice, mantras and prayers and things like that. And I have pretty much since 1980 have had TSK classes in various places around the country. And I do that right now. I have 3 classes that meet online. And so I do my TSK with my teaching and while I'm involved with whatever it is, 25 people or something. And so I'm doing both the TSK practice as well as Buddhist practice, and of course, I see no conflict.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't find any conflict either. I know that there are some qualifications, that Rinpoche and others have made, that TSK is not just a dressed up Buddhism, but they are very complementary. And how would you characterize TSK? What kind of a thing is it for people who are not that familiar with it?
Well, TSK is a method. TSK is not a particular set of teachings about reality. It's more like a method to discover how we are in the world, who we are in the world, how we construct this reality, how we develop our presence here. And so TSK is all about doing the practice. It's not about theorizing about life. It's more like being life and participating in life as fully as possible.
The name for the series that we're working on here, this video series, is A New Vision of Reality, taking that from the subtitle of the first book.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's an important thing. It's not a set of teachings or beliefs about the nature of reality. It's something different. It's a path to inquire into reality and become more intimate with it. Would you say that's the case? Is that how you understand it?
I would say that. I would say that's the case, and I would say that the practices kind of bring out how reality manifests through us. It's not a matter of we're doing something separate from what TSK or what life is. It's more like it comes through us. It's not something that comes to us. It's more like something that comes through us. And we all have a view of reality, whether we know it or not. And one of the things about practice, whether it's Dharma practice, Buddhist practice, TSK practice, is you actually discover some of the beliefs that you didn't know that you had, but that you're living out pretty much 24/7.
How would you describe the kinds of classes that you're teaching? What do you like to explore? What are you opening up with the kinds of classes that you offer on TSK?
Well, that kind of gets into the format, and the format that I use is the one that was taught to me back when I first started, which is we do some practice and then we talk about what happened, and then we do some more practice and we talk about what happened. And it's not a matter of like discovering. So we're not talking about it because we're looking for something. We're talking about it because we're allowing ourselves to be amazed to be alive. And so it's like, oh, okay, so this is how it's happening. This is what's happening. And so we get to know what the exercises kind of, how they whittle away our various beliefs and unconscious kind of motivations and things like that.
Right. Do you have any personal practices that stand out to you as favorites, things that you like to engage with or that you've returned to again and again over the years?
I wouldn't say that I have any, one, but I do have in each section, I do have my favorites. So, for example, awareness is a reflective surface in the knowledge section. It kind of allows us to just relax and participate in being and how being manifests to us and through us. And so whether that's the exercises from the knowledge section or something like the participation exercise in number 9 in the space section, which also basically talks about, how do we manifest our vision and get to know the subject and the object and get to know how they arise together. And so we do these practices, and then as we have insights, we share. So that's the format of the class. Yeah.
Got it. So do you work with any particular books, focusing in on a book for a class, or do you just draw from different time or space sections of the different books?
I work exclusively with the first book, and I do 10-week segments on each section. And so we do the book in about 9 months, and then we start again. And so, we continue to work with the exercises that are in the first book. And then, of course, it kind of, as our understanding deepens, in a way, we're all beginners, because there is no belief system. It's more like, how do we live in the moment? And so, when we share that, then we kind of, I hadn't looked at it that way or whatever. So we begin to actually, it opens itself up to us as we do the practice. And then, people seem to find it interesting. I mean, some of the people that have been working with me have been doing it for 20, 30 years, literally.
Right.
And so it enriches people's lives, and it kind of allows us to participate in being and not just look for it.
There's something about the first book, and I don't know if it was just because it was the first one I read. I've appreciated all of the books, and they all have something, special to offer. But yeah, that book one, the very first book in the series, has a kind of magic for me. It really stands out.
Yeah, I mean, I find it that, these cycles, they just keep on, it keeps on giving. And so, I never get bored. Yeah, I mean, there are, for example, what's it called? Expanding and condensing. That one is not in the first book. It is in Love of Knowledge. But so I have taken one or two practices from some of the other books, but I would say 90% of what we're working with is in the first TSK book, Time Space Knowledge. Yeah.
Do you work very much with the object in its glow exercise?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very much. I work a lot with the object and its glow exercise, because it's actually the practice that shows us how everything is actually already given together. The simultaneity of all times and beings are already present. And so as soon as we can relax into that, we're one with whatever. It's kind of like the penultimate pointing to the non-dual vision, which TSK promotes, not necessarily exclusively. It's not like this is all there is. There is no such thing as this is all there is. Right. There is only the ongoing unfolding of what is.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, in the opening graphics for the videos that I'm doing right now, I use an image that's, for me, inspired by the object and its glow practice. And would you be able to talk about that practice and describe it for people who haven't engaged with it yet?
Well, probably the easiest way to do that would be, the answer is yes. Probably the easiest way to do that is the recognition that if I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the wall in front of me or the computer in front of me, there is a certain, 2 feet, 5 feet, 7 feet distance between me and the wall, between me and the computer. That's our normal way of looking. I am separate from it. I'm different. But there is another way to look. And the other way to look is that the wall and the computer and me, we're all given together. We're all simultaneously present. The seeming space between me and the wall actually connects me with the wall. It doesn't separate. It doesn't have to separate me from the wall. It can also be seen as one connection between me and the cosmos, between me and the micro world, between me and the tree outside, or the sky, or love, or any of the qualities that actually present themselves. They present themselves simultaneously. They don't present themselves. To look at it as if it was only sequential is limiting us profoundly. The simultaneity of it, which is, of course, the essence of the object and its glow exercise. I am the glow of the computer. The glow is the computer is my glow. So in a sense, it's a metaphorical, but it's all about the given togetherness of it, which is basically the non-dual vision of what we are, how we manifest being. Big B being manifests through us.
Yeah, beautifully put. Thank you. Yeah, so understanding that TSK is not about pursuing or collecting or fetishizing unusual experiences, I still want to ask you, have there been any standout, pivotal, or impactful experiences that have arisen for you through your TSK practice and inquiry over the years?
Well, the answer is yes, but I hesitate to talk about it because it's not what's supposed to happen. It's like, the multiple levels and layers of the teachings are simultaneously present. And when we tap into that, they manifest. But that's not because I'm doing it. It's not because I've created something. It's more like the simultaneity of it is already there. And so in that sense, to look at, to quote from Blake, to look at a big piece, a blade of grass and see the universe is infinite is an amazing experience. But it's a way of looking. It's not something that one needs to cultivate. It's something that's already there. And every once in a while, when I can let go of the world the way I normally see it, I'm separate from it. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, the world really is simultaneously infinite at the same time as it seemingly has all these different levels and layers and practices and so-called experiences. Experience is still on the level of duality. So it's more like, as it comes up, how do we describe it? This is where the conveying of it, the teaching of it, the sharing of it can help other people see through what stops them from seeing the infinity of the moment.
Over time, have you noticed any shifts or cycles in your experience of time or space or knowledge? Would you say there have been any, noticeable or lasting changes to your ways of being and knowing in the world as you've been engaging with this over time?
It's kind of hard to respond, hard to say anything about that, because I'm not exaggerating. I've been teaching and practicing TSK since 1980. And so what I would have been like if I hadn't done that, I can't say, because I have done that.
Right.
It's like the classes that I took, and then the classes that I taught in Berkeley and all around the country, and that I continue to do, obviously impact me as a person. But I can't say what I would have been like if I hadn't if I hadn't done it, because I had done it and continue to do it, and it's still the highlight of my week. That okay, I have this class, I have this other class. I get to do this. It's not so much that I have to do this. It's more like, oh, isn't it amazing? It's wonderful.
How did it first start for you? How did you get in the teacher role for TSK?
I was in the first program that was given at the Berkeley Nyingma Institute, and so after the first year, which was a 9-month program, I was asked to assist in the next one, and then I was from that time on in Berkeley, and then once I was in Colorado, I was traveling quite a bit and had different groups in New York and Houston, in all around the country, in Boulder, obviously. So yeah, it just kind of happened naturally, organically. It just kind of opened up.
Nice. Yeah, I went through a few years ago a teacher training program with Jack Petranker, and I have multiple jobs and multiple other duties, so ultimately I wasn't able to keep up with it and finish it, but I do feel that inclination and attraction to teaching this as well. It's just been such an impactful thing for me. I do share some TSK practices and perspectives in some of my classes at JFKU, but don't do it in any more formal setting than that. But I imagine it must be, definitely a thing to wake up and look forward to engage in that kind of practice and inquiry with people every week.
Yeah, and I have 4 classes, so that's 8 hours of practice right there.
Yeah, that's great. So, some shifting perspectives a little bit. Some say that the time that we're in right now is like a kairotic time, not chronos, but kairos, that we're in a time between gods, between a transition between worlds in some way.
Kind of like a bardo.
Kind of like a bardo, exactly.
Or the gap between thoughts, or the space between thoughts, like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I heard in a video discussion with you some time back that you had spent time with the Kero people, and they also have a sense that there's a momentous transition going on. Is that still your sense now? And how do you relate to this kairotic time or this transition from your TSK perspective particularly?
Well, yes, I do feel like, well, it's change is going on, but change has always been going on. And the way that things are unfolding is always ever new. And so it's not so much that there is something that we're destined to do. It's more like we're all participating in it, and we are the change that's happening. And yes, the Kero, I studied with the Kero down in Peru for about 6 years. And they do say that at the time when the conquistadors came and basically took over the Mesoamerican and the South American cultures, that was a time of consciousness shift. It was a way that awareness actually shifted. And they say that happens every 500 years or so, and this is the time. And so, they don't say what is going to happen. Nobody necessarily knows what is going to happen, but they do say that we are the time that these changes are taking place. And so, yeah, I do think that that's happening. I just don't think that it's something that, it's a little bit like, I am the windshield and you are the four tires and somebody else is the steering wheel. When we put it together, it's a car. But as long as we only see it as these pieces, then we're not really seeing the big picture. We don't understand yet, what it is that the transformation is presenting as us. It's not presenting itself to us. It's presenting through us.
Right.
And so that's really important in terms of the changes that are going on. That's what my teachers in South America believed, and I think that is the case. But I don't see it as a consequence or as a problem. And it's never been like this before. So we don't have anything to quote unquote compare it to. But we can be amazed by how or what is happening. And yes, sometimes it's going to be playful, and sometimes it's going to be horrific. But those are our perspectives.
What brought you down to Peru and to working with the Quero?
I've been a psychotherapist for quite a while, and I was teaching NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and at one point assisting, not so much teaching, but this was in the early 90s. And one of the NLP teachers basically said, you know what, I'm going to bring up a shaman from South America, and we'll do NLP with him, and we'll find out how he manifests his world. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate in that and spend 3 weeks with a shaman in the Utah desert, kind of doing different practices, becoming familiar with energy and things like that. And that was the beginning. And so that was, I think that was like in March, and in May I went down and spent a couple of weeks down in Cusco and in the mountains with the Quero. And then for every year thereafter, I went down there for at least a couple of weeks.
I have a long interest in traveling to that part of the world and haven't done so yet. I feel a natural affinity and attraction, and I think my wife is part of that. When she looks at images or meets people from that part of the world, she feels a deep kinship to her own Nepalese people.
Mm-hmm. Well, having been both in Nepal and in the mountains of Peru, I would say yes. There's definitely, to me too, there is some kind of connection. And no, the mountains are not the same. Just like it's not the same at Mont Blanc either. but the qualities and the energies of nature are amazing. Whether it's in South America or the Himalayas, yeah.
In thinking about the transition that's maybe afoot, one way that I was thinking you can look at it is possibly the emergence of a new logos. I'm listening sometimes to a cognitive scientist and Buddhist practitioner named John Vervaeke on YouTube, and he's got some very interesting series on consciousness and the nature of the self and the meaning crisis. And sometimes he talks about the logos. He draws on Greek tradition to make that reference. But logos is also an important term within TSK, not that often discussed or explored in my experience of working with the teachings or going to workshops. But what is your sense of the meaning of logos within the TSK context?
Knowingness. And knowingness is an aspect of being. Knowingness is an aspect of space and spaciousness. Knowingness is an aspect of what time is presenting. So yes, it's totally integral. It's the knowledge aspect, and TSK is, I mean, those three, time, space, and knowledge, like Rinpoche says in the book, they're not the only way to see things, but they are one way of seeing the world. And so whenever we're knowing, and in terms of mind and mental events, and I know some of these are Buddhist terms and some of these are TSK terms, and they do kind of point to the same thing. They're not the same thing. I mean, it's profoundly important that we recognize that it's great that things are different. It's not only great that things are similar, it's also great that things are different. And we have to make sure that, we honor that, because that is the way that logos, or knowing, or knowledge presents itself at this time in this place. But tomorrow is another day. So again, it's like it comes back to that Bardo quality. It comes back to the gap. It comes back to awareness, which is always present. Our mind may not be able to grok it at the moment, but it's really important that we recognize that it's not something new. It's not okay, this is the new way of being. It's more like it's always new. So if we can appreciate the novelty of the moment and participate in it on that basis, then absolutely, it's all about logos. And yet, logos is also only one way of seeing. So it's not one or the other. Again, it's a little bit like the object and its glow, to come back to that.
I remember, I don't remember the exact passage or quote, and you might, but someplace, maybe it was in Knowledge of Time and Space, Rinpoche says that, multiplicity and difference does not present any problem any more than an abundance of wildflowers on a mountainside will present any problem.
Right. And the way I sometimes look at it is, a rose is a perfect rose, but a rose is a terrible tulip. And so, we appreciate things for what they are and how different they are, but they don't have to be the same. They don't have to fulfill the same function. They don't have to look alike. We can appreciate them in their differences. Again, it's anyway.
I remember as a boy that resonates with me as an early insight that I had as a child when I was out walking. I think as a self-conscious teen, going through self-doubt and all of the different kinds of angsty things that teens go through. But I remember walking out in a forest and beholding all of these different trees and rocks and formations, and sometimes they were flawed and broken, and it didn't matter. I loved every one of them just as it was. And I thought, why do I beat myself up so much for these imagined flaws and imperfections when I look at that tree and it's just wonderful, just as it is.
Exactly. I mean, we go down like in Big Sur, or you go to the ocean, and you have these trees that are amazing. They're kind of like they're basically horizontal. I mean, a tree is supposed to be standing up, right?
Yeah.
And we see these things, and in one sense, oh, a poor tree. On the other hand, isn't it amazing? It doesn't have to be an oak. Doesn't have to be a palm tree. I mean, things do have their own quote unquote nature.
Right.
And we can appreciate it for that.
Right. Yeah, that's a big word that stands out for me from TSK practice, is appreciation.
Well, in TSK, we say space allows, time presents, knowledge appreciates. So yes, it is right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mentioned John Vervaeke a little bit ago, and one of the long-running discussions that he's had on YouTube is on what he calls the meaning crisis. And some people consider us to be in the midst right now of what you could call a meta crisis, kind of a perfect storm of different crises that are manifesting at the same time, not only ecologically and politically, economically in some ways, but also just how do we uh, make sense of what's going on in the world? How do we trust what's real or not? There seems to be significant damage right now to our information ecosystem in terms of people being able to make sense of the world and to navigate in it and participate in it in a meaningful way. There's a lot of people feeling lost or alienated. There's a seems to be a crisis around legitimacy. What counts as legitimate knowledge? Crisis around capability. How do we respond wisely and sufficiently to the wicked messes that we're finding ourselves in the midst of? So, um, in my sense of TSK, it has something to say about all of that. But what is your sense? What would the TSK response to this meta crisis be?
Well, the TSK response would be that there is, just as things manifest differently in time, things manifest differently as meaning. And yes, in obviously, we've never had a time like this before. But you can say that about Napoleon. You can say that about Hannibal. You can say that about, basically things are constantly shifting and changing. And, there is a certain anthropocentric, kind of view that takes it for granted that this moment is the pinnacle of what happens. But no, this moment is just like any other moment. It's constantly shifting and changing, and we're not getting away with just holding on to yesterday's ideas, because things are shifting so quickly that we actually need to recognize that the transformation of meaning is itself part of the unfolding. It's not necessarily only part of the problem. It's also part of the solution.
There's a ecological philosopher named Henrik Skolimowski, and he looks at kind of different epics from a Western perspective. He was looking at a time that he called Theos, where God was the center, and then the next was a period called Mekanos, where we saw the world I think in light of what TSK calls technological knowledge. And now he says we're in he draws these little plateaus for the different prevailing sensibilities for a time period, and then in between them there's a gap where it all becomes like a bunch of tangled string as meaning differentiates, and then new patterns emerge for a time.
Right. Well, that's the complexity. I mean, that is pretty much a description of the emergence of what's constantly happening. I mean, in that sense, meanings are like lava. They kind of spurt up and they hot and they burn you, or they assume these beautiful shapes or whatever they do, and then it changes again. So in that sense, again. You can look at the if we come back to the Cairo prophecies, there again, it's like, yes, something is shifting and we don't know what it's going to look like yet, but the shifting quality is guaranteed. The meaning we may or may not be able to see it with our present ways of thinking.
Mm.
But new ways of thinking are always popping up. And some of them will last 5 years and some of them will last 500 years. Yeah.
Would you be able to say anything about what TSK means by technological knowledge, to unpack that a little bit, since that's been such a prevalent form of knowledge for our time?
Well, I think, this is a simile. It's a little bit like Newtonian physics, classical physics, where things are. It's true that on a mechanistic, on a cause and effect level, that's the way things operate. On the other hand, modern physics has other ways of also accounting for the same phenomena, and it's no longer mechanistic. And it has much more of a creative unfolding quality to it. So I don't know if that responds to what you were asking, but I think that TSK appreciates all the forms of knowledge. And so it's not trying to usurp, this is the way things are.
Right.
That's why when in the beginning I was saying, it's a heuristic, it's a methodology. It's not, this is the way the world is. It's more like, how can we look at the way the world is in 16 different ways or 64 different ways? And isn't it amazing that that's what's happening? And not nail it down. And then from a Buddhist standpoint, of course, that's the foundation of Madhyamika. It's a non-affirming negation. It's basically, it's not so much this is the way things are. It's more like you can't say the way things are, but they're certainly not. They're not solid and they're not rigid.
Right. Right.
So just to bring in both Buddhism and TSK, they account for the phenomena but differently.
Yeah, there's a way that I've experienced TSK as it does something to, I think it goes back to the object and its glow and the given togetherness. Part of the sense of the technological knowledge is that we're somehow cut off from knowledge, that we are here and knowledge is out there and it's something we possess or that we have to acquire, or that we live in a condition of knowledge poverty unless we go through certain steps. And seems that TSK opens that up a little bit. It thaws that a little bit.
I agree. I think it does. Yeah. It just doesn't take a position, and it's very difficult not to take a position, because what our scientific worldview requires us to do is to have an explanation and have an understanding based upon certain things that we think are real. And push comes to shove, it's that too is just a point of view, and that too is a way of knowing. And
Right.
Our ways of knowing are quote unquote legitimate, although some obviously fit the facts more than others.
What would you like to see, if anything? I'm not presupposing that there needs to be a positive answer to this, but what would you like to see happen next for TSK in terms of its manifesting and expression in the world?
I think that TSK is basically a breath of fresh air, kind of. It's like it presents us with some alternatives in terms of how we see the world and how we participate in it. The technological view is by definition dualistic. And so, we describe it over there, and I'm describing how my mind works over here. And so we're actually taking the dualistic view to be the be all and the end all. And from any of the wisdom traditions, basically, it's just one view. And so what I see TSK doing is essentially opening that up for people to have that as an experience, not just as a theory. Does TSK have to be done by everybody? No. It's like, it's right for some people and it's not right for other people. I mean, not everybody takes to it. For some people, it's like amazing. Where has this been? This needs to be, propagated in a much broader way. From another perspective, that's all we need. We only need 500 people doing it around the globe for it to make a huge difference. So it doesn't have to be everybody. It's not for everybody, and that's not meant to be in any way separating people out. Again, it's like, different colors have different energies, different ways of knowing have different ways of manifesting. So I don't think TSK is missing anything. I don't think the world is missing anything. TSK is there, and the people for whom it speaks do come across it at the right time. I have to mention that one time I had somebody come to one of my classes, and she said, I don't know what happened, but I went to the bookstore and this book fell on my head. And so I went to the guy who runs the bookstore and I said, what is this? And he said, you're starting a class next week. So I guess I'm meant to be here. So, I mean, I don't know how that happened or why that happened, or it's not mystical. It's not, but things like that happen. It's like, when the teaching or the person or the intimacy is appropriate for you, you open yourself to it. You open your heart to it. You open your mind to it. And it's what needs to happen.
And obviously there's some humor about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Humor is very important.
Yeah. Famously, TSK eschews, I think, consolidation into an institution with a fixed set of ethical precepts or a sangha or anything like that. Do you think that can limit TSK in any way, or does that free TSK?
Yeah, there's no outside force that's making it happen.
Right.
So in a way, that's why it's like, I've said this, before, but it's the same statement. It's like, it's happening. Being is manifesting itself through us. And so, the way that happens is totally unpredictable. And at the same time, it's intimate. So people come back because they like the intimacy, not only with each other, but also with themselves. It provides us with a way of getting to know aspects of ourselves that we don't ordinarily see or are not familiar with.
Have you ever, for yourself or with students, worked with TSK in a healing context, dealing with trauma or pain or anything like that?
Yes, and again, it can be used in that sense, just as we can, we need to make space for pain, even though it's unpleasant.
Right.
I mean, we need to make space because that it's just as much a part of reality as anything else, and so healing is the tricky part is that healing can be an expression of something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. At the same time, if I bring some, let's say, love and acceptance to somebody, it provides them with a space that lets them be. That in a way is healing. When I'm doing TSK practice, do I go into that space? Yes, I do. And does that mean that certain things happen in the body, in the energy, in the trauma, or I see it differently? Yes, that happens. But is that a healing modality? I wouldn't want to say. I wouldn't want to go there.
I appreciate
and
that.
yeah, and at the same time, I happen to be a licensed acupuncturist, and I do energy healing,
Mhm.
if and when it's appropriate. But I'm not a healer, an energy healer to whom people come, and I don't practice acupuncture anymore either. But so I do see there's a healing aspect to all of the wisdom traditions.
Mm.
So that doesn't make to me, that doesn't make TSK unusual. It's like, do I call upon the medicine Buddha if I'm doing healing? Yes, I do.
Mm.
That's not TSK, but it is the healing aspect of wisdom.
Right, right. In your work in psychotherapy, has TSK informed, how you work in any way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, obviously, it's based on a non-dual vision.
Mm.
And so, again, my therapy is not separate from me. My therapy is not separate from meeting another being. And so it's a dance together. It's not a matter of, I'm laying something on somebody. Unfortunately, there are some therapeutic endeavors that are kind of like that. And then you feel like, your hands are tied.
Right. I actually haven't done it formally. I guess I could say informally. I've experimented with it a little bit, but do you work much with the Kumye body exercises?
Yes.
And
Well, I work with Kunye both as Kunye,
Hmm.
and I also work with Kunye in the knowledge section. You have the embodiment of knowledge, which is basically energy circulation, and you can look at it as the microcosmic orbit. If you're coming from a Chinese tradition, you can look at it as, and yoga, you can look at it as any number of things. And so, yes, TSK doesn't exclude Kunye.
Mm.
And in that sense, it's inclusive, and like I say, the light exercise, the body's exercises that are in there, the whole embodiment, the first 5 or 6 exercises in the space sections are all about working with the body. So yes, the TSK definitely includes working with the body, energetically as well as circulation, as well as healing.
Yeah, I found that the little bit I've worked with it, it's been very complimentary. I think just the way of opening up the body through the Kumye practices and kind of massaging, the areas of blockage or tension, which I think the expanding and contracting exercise from love of knowledge plays there. Yeah, there's a sense, I don't know if I talk about it in some of my psychology classes, but in a way, in the West, we kind of inherit the idea that emotions and feelings are something that, in order to be authentic, have to happen to us, that we're not creatively involved in them. Only if it happens to me, then it's a real feeling. But if I'm involved in it, somehow it becomes compromised. But I find a very different attitude in Kumye and in Tibetan tradition in general, that all of those are very workable, massageable, exercisable dimensions of ourselves.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah.
All right. Well, I've quite enjoyed this conversation with you, and those are the questions I wanted to explore. Is there anything standing out for you that you'd like to talk about or mention?
No, I think that was this was kind of fun.
Good.
I mean, this is what I do. I like talking like this. So yeah, it gives us an opportunity to explore some of these aspects that are not necessarily so common.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your insight and the wisdom that you shared here. Thank you.
My pleasure.